The Humanitarian Futures Programme at King's College London and the US strategic consultants Linksbridge are collaborating on an exercise named Hurricane Alyssa, exploring a new concept for distributing aid after a fictional Caribbean disaster. Speaking from his Seattle office, the principal of Linksbridge, Robin Schofield, was asked by Gary Selfridge of HFP whether he agreed with a controversial statement made by the United Nations Senior Advisor on Disaster Risk Reduction.
The United Nations Assistant Secretary General, Margareta Wallström, has said that humanitarianism as we know it is coming to an end. Now, do you agree with that statement? And if so, what should happen?
Well, I certainly agree that it potentially should come to an end. And I understand definitely what she's saying in terms of a system that patently is not working the way that it needs to at the moment. Frustration, I think, from member states that they've invested in it for arguably 50, 60 years and not had anything like the results they're looking for. And also perceive a strong movement, you could almost say, from individuals in countries that they want and need their governments to really kind of get this right, and they're not ready to wait much longer. Whether it really will come to an end, I think, is a much larger or more difficult question, because of the strong vested interests. And whereas many people are quite keen to kind of point to the faults of the current system, I don't yet perceive strong appetite to throw it out in favour of something that people can genuinely say is quite different.
Ms Wallström has also called for a strong vision to emerge from the member states of the UN to create a safer and healthier world, as she puts it. I mean, again, do you think that is achievable? And if so, what must be done to achieve it?
Sadly, I don't think there's a lot of evidence that that's a near-term possibility. When you talk about the member states of the UN, it's a pretty divided group. And whereas you could have argued, let's say, 10 years ago, the United States was in a particularly strong, both economic, military, indeed, moral position to take a leadership role. Now, that's, I think, severely challenged. And without American buy-in, it's hard to see much progress. I think we also now see emerging powers such as China, India, the rest of the Brazil-Russia group, essentially sensing that the world order that we see at the moment is now very much up for negotiations. So I'd instead potentially see a reasonably extended period of a shakeout between these powers before a greater degree of consensus can be taken and indeed proper action taken.
How would you describe the role of the Humanitarian Futures Programme in the way in which it operates in the sector?
So I think a really good example of a very concrete thing that HFP is doing at the moment is the Hurricane Alyssa project. And it's important in a number of ways. First of all, it's getting out there this big idea that if you could use mobile phones, internet-based technologies, in the wake of a natural disaster to get real cash in the form of vouchers into the hands of people directly affected by the disaster, you actually fundamentally change the dynamics of the aid response. For the first time, individuals be able to pick and choose the services which they know they need rather than it's decided by somebody else. And hugely importantly, you can start to leverage the local merchant systems, supply chains, much more efficiently than flying in goods from abroad. In effect, it becomes an immediate and very important economic stimulus rather than the handouts that normally are given in the wake of such a disaster. And it's also important and I think very innovative in terms of how HFP is prosecuting the idea. Because rather than developing white papers and doing lots of research, which might take years, I think it's setting about it with a real sense of urgency. So it's actually put out the concept already in the form of a cartoon, which has attracted incredible interest from across both the for-profit and non-profit world. And what it's also doing is organising a strategic simulation, a wargame if you like, where real experts from both technology companies, mobile phone companies, the non-profit world are going to get together and literally in the space of a 24-hour period flesh out exactly where does this work, where does it not work, what has meaningful impact, what does not have meaningful impact, and if for any reason the system does not work because a particular component is missing, how could that be filled in, who would do it, what kind of resources are required. It should be a really important event and led by HFP.